hello to the internet and welcome to our first podcast on AI filmmaking. I'm Robert Wald. I'm the Director of AI Innovation at Gold Leader AI. We are developing films and various AI applications in the film industry. And this is my buddy, Jake Serlin.
Hey, I don't know which camera to look at. Hey.
That's always good to keep your bases covered.
Got to keep your options open, as with all things AI.
Yeah.
And I am an AI filmmaker, professional editor of 20 years, an award-winning traditional filmmaker, and just trying to take the next steps as best I can to keep in line with where the film industry is headed, and that means AI.
And that is a very difficult endeavor, wouldn't you say?
It's very, very hard for a myriad of reasons, not the least of which is being, hey, man, I don't like the computers taking over the world as much as the next guy, but I would also rather be on the boat than in the water. So right now it's a matter of, okay, we've got to figure out how to use these tools as tools and be as creative as possible in the process.
You're full of optimism.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to kill us in the long run.
But in the meantime, we'll make some profit.
All right, sounds nice.
What have you been working on lately?
So recently, I've been making an advertisement for one of our myriad of clients, and we're trying to push the boundaries in terms of what can you do for an articulated speech-based narrative like sketch. Basically, can you make a AI-generated product that actually feels like something that was filmed with scripting and actors involved, as opposed to a series of interesting images to a VO track, which is kind of the traditional methodology of generative AI at this point. Yeah. And it requires a lot of being clever with the software, a lot of classic editing, and it is a very educational experience, and it is showing both the incredible advantages that you are afforded by basically having only your imagination as the limitation, but also the myriad of drawbacks that are encompassed by I am at the mercy of a technology that has not found its footing quite yet. And so it's been a roller coaster. It's been fascinating and frustrating, but then again, such is filmmaking.
Always has been.
Trust me, it's disgusting. It is both a blast and awful all at once. And there's a reason why so many filmmakers are addicted to so many substances. It's the rainbow that they're addicted to is just as varied as the people that make them.
Well, the economy's got to be supported. So yeah, it's really, filmmaking has always been complicated and interesting and fascinating, and now it's super technically complicated. Right now, we're focusing on some of the low-hanging fruit in the area, commercials being one of the obvious ones, one of the ways to get to work out there, and there's definitely a growing demand for agencies and commercial and generated commercials, both on an individual basis and on a larger agency basis. And everyone's kind of just finding their feet. So, diving in there is a good place to start to test the technology.
I think it's good for everybody. Like right now, if you are an aspiring filmmaker or aspiring AI filmmaker, spec commercials are where it's at right now. Not because it's like, oh, what this glorious aesthetic medium, but just as an advertisement for yourself that's going to get attention for the people that actually have financial backing that are going to enable you to have a career within this field. And also, by the very nature of advertising, it is a greater abstract presentation than a traditional narrative like short film or narrative feature, which has such a tremendous amount of trappings that you have to follow in order to have it qualify as, oh, this is something that I'm familiar with. Commercials have all the tropes of familiarity, but they are much more abstract. Their styles of continuity are a lot less restrictive. They're a lot easier to make creative choices that may not strictly make sense in terms of like where people are in space or continuity editing. But as long as it's selling the product, that's really the chief part and parcel to what you're trying to accomplish.
Which is a blessing for the current technology because consistency is really the weak point of AI-generated video at the moment.
Yes.
At least beyond beyond an 8-second clip or even a 20-second clip sometimes. getting that sort of consistency is difficult. So the genres that don't require that sort of consistency are the first ones that are taking off.
Exactly. And I think maybe just something that we could speak to more specifically, I guess, would be VO3.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we're talking about consistency, like character consistency in AI has always been an issue, but it is becoming progressively less of an issue in certain regards. If you don't mind your characters not saying anything, you can have a lot of character consistency from shot to shot. It may not be perfect, but it's better than it's been. But VO3 comes out and it changes the game in both great ways and in head-scratching, frustrating ways, not the least of which I think everybody has probably at this point seen the commercial. What was the famous one for the scam company?
Oh,
my
yeah.
opinion, the scam company. In my opinion, when you're selling stock futures on anything, seems a bit legally squishy to me. But
the public doesn't know what it needs to bet on things. Well established that the public needs to bet on pretty much everything.
The used VO3 to its greatest strengths, and that is creating random images with quick audio hits. And they tried to create the most random images possible to give a great sense of variety and a sense of scale and a sense of energy. And it did a good job of that. And it did a good job of not trying to trick you into think that it wasn't AI, which is probably the smart thing to do with a lot of AI at the moment. Articulated speech. The more you try to make it look real, the more I think people's brains kind of start sneaking it out. And if verisimilitude is important to you within AI, I think you're going to have a hard time selling it to a public, at least in my opinion.
I don't know. I mean, one of the big strengths of VO3 is that it kind of lands on the right side of the uncanny valley. And
doesn't overly trigger you, I think.
It's a milestone in AI film generation or any type of AI video generation in that a lot of it does look pretty real unless you're really looking at it. Whereas previous efforts, and there's always been not always, but it's such a rapidly developing field. Single character consistency has largely been solved. Multiple character consistency
Still tricky.
That does not work very well. But and there's some good examples of putting out good video with consistent characters, and people have made shorts and things like that. But there's still, most of that lands because of the process that's been used on the far side of the uncanny valley. And you can tell if it's AI if you really try. Whereas VO3, at least with some of the short things it produces, doesn't trigger you like that necessarily.
Not necessarily. I think a lot of it also comes down to the edit of how long you stay on a shot and what the people are doing within it, because you don't realize how many factors are at play in a given moving image until you see them all actually moving in an artificially constructed environment. And it's amazing how quickly you might notice that something is wrong without noticing the specific thing that's wrong. Like, for example, one of the generations that I made, we had like 8 people in a room and 4 of them were making the exact same face, or they had the exact same pose. They all had their hand in their face in their hand. When you're watching it, and once I've pointed that out and you watch it, you're like, oh, I can only notice that now, that like you have 4 people doing the same thing. When you're focused on the main character, you don't notice that. But I think most people wouldn't notice it intellectually, but somewhere in the back of their brains, they go, something about this image isn't lining up for me. And it's like, can you find the differences in this image? You can tell there's something off about it, but you can't put your finger on what it is. And I think that happens a lot. And not the least of which, I would wager the AI commercial that we were discussing during the NBA game, who's the fantastic company that does wonderful things. That ad, I would imagine, looks more realistic on your phone.
Sure.
When you're watching it on a big television, that's when it does come apart a little bit. Because I, to be fair, I've never seen it on a television. I've only ever seen it on either a computer or my phone. And I would be curious what people say. But my instinct is, or not even my instinct. When I saw it on my computer, wasn't as compelling as it was when I first watched it on my telephone.
Yeah, it was an interesting commercial, but that's what they were going for, was just some realism in a chaotic scene. But I think VO3 is great strength. And what really distinguishes it is that it's really the first model that includes dialogue generation along with the initial render of the video. As you say, there's a lot of elements to an image or a video or a scene that need to be balanced to create either the illusion of realism or something less than that. And I've always put it this way, sound is the most important part of video.
Yeah, absolutely.
By including the sound at the first step, unlike earlier generation methods where you have to generate the video, then you have to lip sync the video to the audio. So it's done separately. And honestly, audio generation is a big part of what makes someone uncanny or not.
Yeah.
And when you can't include that in the initial generation, you don't get as much information into the picture. So that's where people, say, does that look quite right? His lips are moving. It doesn't look bad because a lot of them look pretty damn good. But there's still that sense that it's off, that old sense that you should not be dating that Neanderthal down the street.
I always call it the articulated speech of VO3. It encompasses all aspects of the face down to the neck, down to the chest. Like it includes all the ingredients of the person's movement, which is, I think, a big problem with like the dubbing softwares, which kind of isolate to just the specific facial structure. The way the slight pivots of the head and the slight like small gesticulations of the human body that are accounted for in VO3 aren't accounted for in the dubbing. And so there's always a little bit of loss in that.
There's software that focuses on avatar generation, specifically like Hydra and HeyGen and Synthesia. And they've been tackling this problem as well because they want their avatars to look as realistic as possible. And you see there's this balance and trade-off between, making it look realistic or just animating this area. But when they try and animate the whole thing to get a better illusion, you start getting decoherence. So they haven't solved that. They're working on this problem. And honestly, the avatars are looking a lot better this year. And plus, they can be done now from a single picture instead of having to train a whole model. But they're not as good as VO3 because they're also doing it as a separate step and don't have that articulation, visual articulation logic built in.
Absolutely. Well, because VO3 just took another big step up. So I was about to say, one of the
everything's different from what we would have said 2 days ago.
Actually, as of yesterday, we have to change topics. Articulated speech, VO3, you had to just give a written prompt. That is, I want to see this guy say this thing. And that's all you got. And from that, it would generate a video with a very well articulated speech pattern. Reasonable percent.
It would do what you asked it to.
Yeah. Always bear in mind, man, there's a reason that a lot of the AIs work on a credit system because, boy, are you going to burn through them to get something good. Now they have introduced an image prompt. That is, you can drop an image in there and say, I want of two people and say, I want the guy on the right to say X, Y, Z. It does an admirable job. Is it as good as the text prompts? No, but at least now you're going to get more of a character consistency, and that's the important thing. Or you're going to get one that's stronger than most lip dubbing softwares.
It does look stronger than the lip dubbing softwares, the avatar software that we've been looking at as well. But it's really, I don't want to underestimate the degree of impact that this is going to have towards AI filmmaking. Before VO3 had a really hard cap on doing articulated speech of 8 seconds. If you wanted to go past 8 seconds, they had blocked off all of the paths to doing character consistency. So you couldn't get a consistent character who spoke in multiple scenes more than 8 seconds. There are tricks to extend that and add in things from another generator and to reproduce things. But essentially, the biggest strength of VO3 was totally blocked at 8 seconds. And you can see why that might be, because being able to do a near perfect 8 seconds of realistic images is one thing. Being able to do 60 seconds is another thing. It leads to a whole host of other problems. So that was blocked off, but either through their normal development plans or more likely pressure from the industry, the film industry certainly really wants this. Now, because you can do consistent articulated speech video from images, now you can go well past 8 seconds. Now the realm of really good looking film generation greater than 8 seconds is within reach in an understandable way without having to go through a really tedious process. Although again, you don't get the visual articulation, which is VO3 strength. But now we have the strength of VO3 plus the ability to go as long as you want, as long as you're willing to put the work in.
Yeah.
And now you can get long form video. I don't think it was reasonable to do long form film before. Now it's a matter of tedium, which means it's something that could potentially be automated as well.
Automated to an extent.
I mean, you shouldn't fully automate this stuff. I mean, there are things that do that, but they don't come out that very well.
I think like therein lies the dilemma that is AI, because it's like, who's going to be the good faith actors and who are going to be the bad faith actors, like working within this. And that's what's going to make a lot of things get like the problem of democratizing anything creative is you open it up to a tidal wave of noise. And if you're optimistic about how those types of things work and it's like, oh, well, the cream's going to rise, conceivably, but now the cream is also operating under what you call it, an algorithm, which gives it an entirely different methodology. It's going to be difficult to see who takes this in creatively compelling ways and really makes great use of it, or if it gets drowned out of noise of people just trying to spam as much content as possible in the hopes of hitting the algorithm just
for clicks.
Yeah, for clicks. And it's an unfortunate. It actually mirrors the difficulty of AI filmmaking as concept, which requires that AI filmmakers can pivot instantly. Because, as you said, what was true yesterday is not true today. You have to be able to, at a moment's notice, oh, I have to change everything I'm doing right now because this has just gotten better in such a way that it requires me to give it my full attention right now.
Keeping on top of this is one of my main jobs. And honestly, that is more than a full-time job now, just to keep on top of how fast things are changing in the AI film industry, let alone the general AI industry with all the things that are changing there. It's become nearly impossible now to keep up. We are ready, just in the way that Hollywood and distributors and networks were structured, it's already an issue of the cream rising to the top, because even though it's not AI, it's still a very commoditized industry where the people who are in charge of the industry, the mid-level managers, the high-level managers, they're not necessarily looking for the cream. They weren't looking for the clicks per se, but they were looking for the marketability.
Absolutely.
And not everyone likes cream.
Yeah.
And how do you solve it? So is this really any different, except on a grander scale and taking over the entire industry, other than hollowing out the whole thing? Is it really any different than the corporatization that was already in progress?
Whatever comes after YouTube, and something always will, that is going to have a different gatekeeping metric that I think is probably going to be a little bit more locused on the quality of the content being produced versus the volume of it being produced. Volume will still be a portion of it, but it's what blue sky is becoming in the wake of Twitter X starting to like cave in on itself. You're going to see that within the video sphere, probably within the due to a tidal wave of generative AI content.
So YouTube, I think yesterday, stopped monetizing certain classes of AI.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I forget what the details are, so I probably shouldn't say it on camera. But they have stopped monetizing some of that, not all of that.
Yeah.
But I guess they're going to judge it more than they did. They're not cutting it off entirely, but things that are just there to make money by being automatically generated, they're going to try and clamp down on a little bit more. That's pretty open-ended, so we'll see how it actually gets applied.
Yeah.
I guess it's inevitable, but what's driving that exactly, part of the copyright concerns there, and just a reaction to the AI slop and people's reaction to the AI slop.
Disney is currently in open litigation with Midjourney over using copyrighted Disney materials for their training models. That is to say, hey, give me a Mickey Mouse looking design, and suddenly Mickey Mouse just shows up in your prompt.
Yes.
And if you know anything about the mouse, boy, the mouse is one litigious entity. It is. And this was always a matter of time before the big corporate concerns started getting chesty with one another.
Absolutely.
And this is probably what's going to lead to a lot. It's going to lead to a lot of interesting litigation. It's invariably going to go to the Supreme Court. And we're going to see a lot of very peculiar outcomes because a lot of times you can sort of predict where the Supreme Court's going to go when it's a huge moneyed interest versus a niche interest. Generally, the large money interest is going to win. Not always, but generally. Now you have $2 billion industries that vehemently disagree with one another. One is saying, hey, I'm just trying to make stuff that people want to see. And the other one's saying, I own what people want to see. And where do you draw the line of deviation for that? And that is going to be a fascinating and bloody battle. And it's actually why you don't see as many AI commercials on television, because if one big company says, hey, that image looks remarkably like an image that I own, boy, are you going to have a very hefty lawsuit on your hands. And so it's kind of why the VO3 ad was for a company that was a company, as opposed to it being for a major company that's going to put themselves out there.
There are early adopters who are willing to take the risk, especially there are some, people leading the pack in the agencies and companies that want to adopt this. There is a feeling, and I kind of share this feeling, that some sort of grand agreement will have to happen rather than a general ban on it.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like far too late, and the ban wouldn't even work beyond the United States, if there, because you could stop, our industries, but you can't stop China's industry.
Oh, absolutely. Japanese copyright laws is a weird beast unto itself if you ever watch any of their stuff. But yeah, they love copying stuff. They're great at it.
And there's something to be said for democratization. I mean, everyone knows that Mickey Mouse's copyright has been extended many times just because it's such a big and strong company. We had to strip Pooh Bear naked in order to get him out of copyright recently. But there's also a lot of sub-questions that come up there, like, is it Midjourney's fault? Now, the way an artist learns things, an artist will always look at other pre-existing art. That's how they're taught in art school. They look at things that exist. They learn those techniques.
Imitation is a sincere form of flattery.
The human brain can't store, unless you're eidetic, it can't store all of the many images of Mickey Mouse that might exist, and ad infinitum copyright characters. But a human will take the gist of that and form their own artistic talent. Computer's not doing anything different, except the computer has a much larger memory and ability to remember these things. So is it Midjourney's fault per se if it's able to reproduce Mickey Mouse in this situation? Should Midjourney be refusing to do that to protect itself, or even not learning off of any source material that contains Mickey Mouse? Or is it the individual's fault for actually taking that, using it, and trying to make a profit on it? Because there's a general rule certainly among nonprofit cable stations. When I had a cable show, the rule is basically you can, it doesn't matter so much if you use copyright material. They can ask you to stop, but they can only sue you for what you've made off of it. So it wasn't a big deal to, the public access networks if you were using copyrighted material, to a certain extent. And anyway, so at what level are people going to be pursued? The fact that Midjourney can do something, but a person asked it to do that and then released it, that, should the lawsuit be directed there? We'll have to see how that, it's such a large problem that's going to be dealt with by large institutions. But again, as I said, it in the end, as far as the world goes, the earth beyond the country, it's will only hamper American and Western creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to agree. I mean, I imagine other countries are going through similar things, but I don't know. Or at least any large content creation countries, or at least anybody who has a strong entertainment apparatus.
In the West, where these things are entrenched, as well as the general model for prosperity, that those tendencies already exist and are being activated. I'll mention a company that has just re-released their stuff. Now, they actually, I think, more or less failed last year, called Moon Valley. And they had a model. They were trying to compete with other early adopters like Runway and Pika, who came out first, and were not very successful. But they have now come out with what they're claiming is a safe model. That is, it's been trained on all non-copyright data, and as well as producing a more enterprise-oriented product, which rolls in a lot of advanced features to work with that. I haven't actually touched it yet.
Okay.
I've just seen one thing on it, but just on the first point, that's interesting. And the thing is, every company that's tried to do that before now has wound up not coming out with very good pictures. So are they going to be able to produce decent video in many genres with that methodology? I don't know. We'll see how they do. They have a lot more control over the video, so that's definitely a plus, even more than some of the other commercial companies have, as far as being able to control keyframes and camera movement to a greater extent than just trying to do it via the prompts or some of the options that may let you control the camera. Now, how well this works, that's a whole different question, because often, the marketing materials don't always line up with what the product.
What?
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that.
It surprised me as well.
Yeah. If AI worked 100% of the time, we would already be in a totally different landscape. And obviously, we're getting closer and closer to it. It's impressive with what it does, but it is deeply imperfect. Sometimes I'll give AI this much. Plenty of times when I've generated stuff, it didn't give me what I wanted, but it gave me something interesting. And it was like, oh, you know what? That wasn't the way I was gonna go. But now that I have something tangible, I will make that work. And so you're also, once again, your ability to pivot comes deeply into play, and to be able to go, okay, AI is having a hard time giving me this thing that I'm asking for, but it's having an easy time giving me this thing. What can I do with this thing that's either going to honor my original idea or that's going to take it into a stronger direction that is still within what I'm trying to conceptualize? And that is, it's funny. It's like, it's both rewards a certain level of creativity, and then it also can be very damning, because that's where slop becomes enticing, where you just go, oh, who cares? Just give me whatever and I'll just make something with that. And you have to be able to withstand a level of frustration in order to generate, like, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
It's like working with a really entitled actor who won't do what you tell him to, but you can't fire him.
Obviously, understanding that, I tend to agree with you, these things are going to advance. How realistic or possible do you think some sort of quality plateau is?
I don't think we've nearly reached that quality plateau. The question is, how powerful are these models going to get? And the same question exists in the general AI field, where the big question is, can LLMs actually achieve AGI, that is human level consistent thought over time? That's an open question now, whether LLMs are even theoretically going to approach that or not.
Yeah.
So, how there's so many things that go on in making films, how much of that can really be covered and covered well. But we've already seen in some of the easier genres, like we said, commercials are one of the first and easiest genres, because it doesn't need consistency as much as, first of all, it's really short. So if you have to have consistency, you can just bang on it till you get something. But generally speaking, you get this consistency enough for commercials, but also the first genres that people really go after have been horror. Horror is a good one, because, if the skull's over there and doesn't look quite the same, is anyone really going to pay attention?
And it's the suspense of not seeing a thing. So, like, you can actually cheat the filmmaking styles in order to get the same effect.
And you have that in music videos as well, where you can have as much chaos as you want. And to a somewhat extent, even documentaries, because you're not necessarily going over the same areas, and you can always go to different outside shots.
Yeah, that's true.
You're only concerned about your avatars and some of your objects that are in the screen. So you ask, how far is it really going to be able to go? It's hard to say how far it's really going to be able to go as far as the long term, because for a really good movie, a complicated movie, there's an awful lot of moving parts, an awful lot of creativity, an awful lot of direction that's going to the actors to really get what you want. And it does introduce a question of, we view that as a way to make quality films, and it probably is. Right now, let's say the pushback is at 80%. You only get 20% of what you want out of an AI actor per se. If we push that up to 80 or 90%, which seems achievable, is that going to be enough?
I wonder how achievable it is, truth be told. And it's not because I think there's any limitations to the technology. I'm just wondering, I still have yet to see an AI performance of character that makes me feel a thing. It's like I can be impressed by it. I can be impressed by its quality and its veracity, but there's still some sort of coldness there. Maybe it's just because I'm aware of what it is. Maybe it's just because I have a sophisticated media palette. That is all very possible, and I'd be happy to acknowledge that and say maybe I'm just the wrong audience. But I wonder, because like, is it just as simple as, hey man, if you put a sad music track underneath a person looking sad, it doesn't matter if they're real or not, sad is sad. I don't know.
Well, I will say that some of the more recent AI film festivals, which we covered one in my monthly meeting a couple weeks ago, they go for the tearjerkers, of course, because that's where you get your emotional stuff. And I think they are starting to cross the line there, even when they're just animated, because you can certainly get emotion from animation. You do that from anime now.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I think animation offers a certain level of, like, it's always important to recognize how much like aesthetic offers certain amounts of forgiveness. For example, you go to see a stand-up comedian, you have a certain expectation of the quality of the joke you're going to hear, or a sketch show, same principle. You go to see an improv show, your expectation of quality of joke drops slow. If somebody just said, because you know they're all whipping it off the top of their heads, as long as they say something moderately clever within the context of what they're presenting, the threshold for what is considered good is totally different. If you're presenting something in a film context as photorealistic, real people, that's going to have a harder time crossing the threshold of emotionality than if you're doing a cartoon character. A cartoon character just needs to have big eyes and a fluffy tail, and if it gets run over, you get sad. And whereas if like a semi-realistic semi-realistic thing gets run over, your brain has a really tough time rectifying it because of the small nuances of what's correct and what's incorrect about it. And I don't know why I chose running over as my example, but you understand the point I'm making.
Yes, that was called back.
Oh, yes, and hey, look at that. A little fucking improv joke there. Way to go. Somebody took it. Somebody went to 101 at UCB.
No, I watched what was that show? The horse show of
BoJack Horseman.
Where they had the great improv episode.
I liked BoJack Horseman. I stopped it when I went, boy, I'd really like my comedy to be funny and not sad. It's a great show.
It's not the show for you.
No, it was.
But there is some funny stuff.
Yeah, no, there's tons of funny stuff, and it was great. But after a certain point, I was like, this show is leaving me depressed after I watch it, as opposed to chuckling at it. And I won't fault its quality. I will just fault that I wanted something to laugh at.
Yeah, totally empathize with that. I do think it was a great show.
Yeah. But I loved was it Neil Adultman? That was my favorite character. 3 kids in a trench coat. I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, what can you do?
But he got rid of now.
Fair enough.
Well, let's talk about anime for a second and cartoons in general. Is there a future for that because of the different process there, the different expectations? Is that going to become entirely AI? Because my interest is primarily realism. I think yours is as well.
Yeah.
But there's more than realism in the world.
Absolutely. I think so, because I think the appearance of effort goes a long way in a lot of things. I think that's why you actually still get people enjoying claymation. And I think it depends largely on your audience and your salesmanship apparatus, truth be told. Because if it's just a thing on the internet that's presented as disposable, people will treat it as disposable. If you go to a film festival and you find a claymation movie, you're going to engage with it a lot more deeply because you're like, oh, fuck, this is somebody who is like physically doing something with their hands. And you can say, well, how do you know that? And I think one of the things that I think people are having a hard time coming to grips with, at least they are on Reddit or they are in any internet discussion forum, we don't live in a vacuum. Everybody enters into watching a piece of content with a lot of external world expectations and feelings and vibes. And you're going, well, if you just see it, if you just saw it without knowing that's a thing, you wouldn't know. It's but you're probably going to know. just because it's going to exist in these patterns.
I mean, what you're describing is true, I think, for us.
Yeah.
Because that was our expectation, how we were brought up, and that's what we're looking for.
Sure.
Is that always going to be true? It's always easy to say that things were better in the past, but there's a lot of bad stuff out there that we reject.
Absolutely.
And yet is not rejected by younger audiences. Their expectations are totally different.
When you say, is there going to be animators anymore? Are there going to be painters anymore? Painting has been an outmoded means of expression for hundreds of years now. There are still painters.
Yeah.
And there are still painters who get paid. And there are still painters who make mass-produced painted artworks. And now, are their numbers large? No. But at the same time, there are still people that do these things and either get them produced and in some like minute cases make a living off of them. That is going to continue.
There's a whole subgenre of people who love fountain pens and go to fountain pen conventions and trade fountain pens.
Absolutely. I don't think cartoons will ever completely go away. I think it's just going to be a lot harder.
Human cartoons.
Human cartoons. Yeah. Human pen drawn like either created by a person animating cell by cell on their computer.
Does anyone actually do that anymore?
Not really. I think it just depends on the aesthetic that you're going at.
I worked on a project a long time ago where even this was after Effects had already been invented, but they insisted on doing the animation cell by cell in Photoshop.
Damn. Wait, cell by cell in Photoshop?
And it wasn't even very good.
No, probably not. That's some Tommy Wiseau shit right there. That is a silly idea. But I think ultimately you will always have craftspeople creating things. Maybe it'll be for smaller niche audiences. I think live theater is about to make a huge comeback, like real soon. Like, in fact, I know about a small theater that's producing content in Ridgewood right now, and small theaters ain't been a thing in a while. But now you're going to start seeing regional theater, live theater events where you can pay $25 and see a show for the evening. That's about to hit huge, in my humble opinion.
Having produced things in small theaters, it's always difficult to get an audience. And in the Village, at least, an awful lot of small theaters, black box theaters, smaller theaters have closed for one reason or another. There aren't a lot left.
There aren't a lot left, but I feel this is my instinct. I could be wrong, but I think the yearning for some sort of immediate live entertainment that can engage people at an emotional level is starting to creep back up. Or if nothing else, people want to see a live show that doesn't cost them $300. And
absolutely.
And I think, and like, it'll be who can figure out how do you get a show at a bar, like a theater production that is like 5 people and a sound system and that's it. And then everything else is just like what's going on.
Oh man, having had comedy shows.
Well, no. I did the comedy scene as well, and shows and bars are torture. Yes, I agree. But I think if you're offering not stand-up comedy, that's a totally different ball of wax, because stand-up comedy's got its
improv.
own. What's that? Or improv, or God forbid improv, or sketch comedy. If you're actually saying this is a show, this is a staged theatrical thing, that gives you a level of gravitas that I think people are going to start gravitating towards sooner rather than later. Not my opinion.
I mean, I would hope so, especially, shows that don't cost an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
For people who are unaware of the lottery system in New York to get into the shows. Shh, don't tell anybody. It's already being overwhelmed. It would be great if there was that sort of resurgence. So this year it's AI.
Yes.
We probably should do this in a different podcast. This year it's AI. Next year it's robots.
Ooh.
How about robot stage?
I'm for robot fights.
I'm not looking for a judgment here.
Robot fights? Yeah. Why not? Nobody's getting hurt then. And fuck it. Like, hey, I liked it. What was the little robot?
Hey, why don't we stop fighting each other and just beat up the audience? That'll get good ratings.
Yeah, probably. Or what was the robots fighting each other show? Like the BattleBots.
I filmed a season of that.
Oh, no.
Way back.
The cameraman? No, fair enough. I'd be down for another episode of BattleBots. But especially if they're like humanoid BattleBots, that's just fun.
That seems a little, yes, it'd be fun, but what I didn't like about BattleBots is that they weren't automated. They were
remote control.
People with remote. So it's just, mechanized fighting. Whereas if you have what I would like to see, and probably no one else wants to see this, is core wars brought to the real world.
What is
Core
Core Wars?
programs fighting each other in a virtual world. I don't even know if they do it anymore, but their program themselves are not being done with a remote. So if we had battle bots, I'd want to see, autonomous battle bots.
Oh, sure.
That's interesting.
What do you want to see them like? This is what the strategies we're programming them to do.
Initially, it'd be human programming of the battle bots. Eventually, they would program themselves. And eventually, they'd figure out how to make the best profit, which is probably not to be found in the ring. Take it from there. So many ways. So many ways that when the revolution comes.
We will not be spared.
I'm going to be spared.
I firmly disagree because you actually have the knowledge base to affect them. They don't want that.
Computers love me.
They want slaves. That's where I come in.
They need both.
That's true.
So yeah, next year robots, there's a lot of movement there. And that's not, I don't think the theater is their first target.
I would imagine not.
There's probably a couple targets before that, but eventually, I go for Asimov's thought, which is in most of his books, that robots should be banned from Earth and should only be used on the outer colonies.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight that. That seems like a good idea to me. I'm for that. I was going to say, are we going to start dipping into the sex bot talk, or should we stay away?
No,
let's
say the sex bot will be behind the paywall.
Oh, there you go. That's our Patreon. Patreon exclusive.
I won't even go there. Just stop tempting me.
Hey man, if you're going to talk about the old VHS versus Betamax thing, so goes humanity where the sex goes. So. And sooner or later, 'tis a topic that we'll have to. We don't have to talk about it now.
Well, now you piqued my interest. Back to your question of, is it really going to be able to cross the line for mass appeal and realism? Sure. I kind of think it is.
Okay.
I just don't see too much of whereas the LLMs may have a limit to what they can achieve, but that's a whole separate discussion. Intelligence is not just how one LLM operates in isolation. There's more to it than that. And I think Lacombe is ignoring that. But as far as representation on the screen, I think the whole workflow to achieve a realistic results is achievable. And given we're only 2 years in, and we're finally now approaching the place where we could conceivably make a short that stays largely within the uncanny valley or, not in there, with enough effort and money sort of implies that that there is no limit there that's going to prevent that.
I agree with you to an extent, but I definitely dip back to my argument of nothing is going to exist in a vacuum. And one of the greater uphill battles of that is how do you sneak something past that? I think it's inevitably going to be some sort of hybrid model. I think it'll be, you're going to have, if not AI actors interacting with real actors, there's going to be some sort of percentage base for each thing. And it wouldn't shock me if there ends up being some sort of litigation about what qualifies as an AI movie versus what qualifies as a live action film. And then there's some sort of percentage based thing with Midjourney. I think you're going to see something like that, from the Hollywood unions coming out sooner rather than later.
It opens up actually a whole variety of topics, which we probably don't have time for, but again, we're only 2 years into this and only really now crossing the valley. What if we had real AI actors? That is, what if AI actors were continuous and instead of programming via prompts, we talked to them and told them what to do, just like we do with actors today? That's not out of reach. I don't think it's out of reach.
Okay, fair enough.
In fact, I'm fairly sure it's not out of reach, just a matter of tedium and effort. That adds a whole new dimension to producing AI films. Because then you have actual actors. People will process that differently. If their actors can be in more than one film, more than one AI film, they could be reused like that.
But I don't know, I guess that's such a strange concept because then it's
welcome to 2025.
Literally. Well, no, just because the whole notion of just normally you put an actor in makeup or whatever.
Sure.
But in this case, it's just no, it's the same actor, but now he's this. And it's just then what's the same about him? It's it's got the same vocal frequency.
It's got its memories. I'm not saying it's not strange. What I would like to do, with one of these theaters that we're looking at is build, an LED volume wall as well as an audience. And I'd like to do this in New York. And I keep dropping this to people because I'd like to make it happen. Just some place where we could have real actors interact with AI actors, and AI actors backed up by a consistent LLM to start giving them some semblance of reality.
Okay.
And there we can do interviews and theater and awards. So live theater there with a volume wall and maybe some glasses that merge them together. Or you can merge it in camera, but
but if you wanted people
presentation as
there,
well.
you want them wearing 3D glasses.
Yeah, you that illusion, which you can get.
Hmm.
I'd like to see more of those, or at least start one in New York.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably see that sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Do you have a sign off, or do we have something that we can?
No, we should have a sign off contest.
Oh, want an AI?
Yeah. Let's image this picture right now, and later we will animate that.
Goodbye.
Yes.
All right.
I'll lip sync it later.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Or we'll VO3 in real time next time.
Oh, perfect.